instituted the sacrament of the Eucharist, sharing with us his body and blood. He did so during the Passover, the Jewish feast which harkens back to when the Israelites were led out of Egypt by Moses and were famously commanded by God to eat unleavened bread. Because God, as recounted during the Scriptures, instituted the sacraments under particular forms and by certain signs, the Church prescribes that the essential matter of these sacraments must continue to be observed when the priest or bishop does these same actions. In the case of the Passover, that means the Eucharistic host must be composed of wheat bread and grape wine in imitation of Christ, meaning that when these elements are lacking from the sacrament, even if a priest says the right words and intends the right things, he will fail to confect the Eucharistic body and blood of Jesus. For example, if a priest were to use hard cider instead of grape wine, he would not then have the blood of Christ, because apples do not come from grapevines, which is a minimum component of Eucharistic wine. Likewise, because wheat is an essential property of Eucharistic bread, as noted in the general instruction of the Roman Missal, gluten-free bread does not correspond to the actual stuff used in the institution of the Eucharist by Christ, and cannot produce the genuine sacrament. Are those who suffer from allergies and intolerances to gluten prevented then from receiving the most central of Christian sacraments, the Holy Eucharist? While the Eucharist itself must always be composed of certain minimum elements, the ratio of these elements can be shifted around as the needs of the Christian faithful require. For this reason, hosts that contain an infinitesimal amount of gluten, but not no gluten whatsoever, can be used to validly produce the Eucharist. In the related case of communion wine being hazardous to a priest's health, Rome permits the priest to confect mustum, which is a grape-based beverage that has an extremely minimal quantity of alcohol. It should be kept in mind that in all cases, as long as the sacrifice is celebrated validly, the wholeness of Christ's body and blood are contained not in two parts across the forms of bread and wine, but in a complete manner under both species, so that anyone who receives the blood receives Christ's mystical body as well, and anyone who receives the body receives also the blood.